America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jon Hale, author of The Choice We Face, The Origins of School Choice and the Demise of Public Education. Meanwhile, divisions between House Democrats deepen in the infrastructure fight as a group of centrist Democrats threaten to blow the whole thing up. Yesterday's budget process ended without resolution. More on that in a bit. After the FDA granted Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine full approval, the military, the NYC school system, and more have announced vaccine mandates, and more will follow as Biden publicly urges more employers and businesses to require the shots. The era of Andrew Cuomo has officially ended. The embattled former governor, feels good to say, resigned yesterday, commuting some sentences on his way out, and Kathy Hochul was sworn in at midnight. She's the first female governor of New York State. In Afghanistan, the Taliban announced that they will no longer allow Afghans to go to the airport to evacuate the country, as U.S. troops are set up to assist with evacuation efforts, so could be a clash there. Extreme heat is hitting a huge swath of this country, causing drought in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and more, causing near record lows in soil moisture. And lastly, in Haiti, the earthquake's death toll has passed 2,200, with tens of thousands left homeless and children without food or medical care. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam is out this week. I will be with you today. As a reminder, if you're just tuning in now, we have a great show for you. I'm excited to talk to Jon Hale a bit about the concept of school choice because, you know, for some reason, education policy doesn't get the attention it probably should in this country. And I think a lot of that stems from this inherent desire by parents to personalize and individualize their own child's education, and how much that's been a part of the way we view education, but a lot of that's by design. And the collective nature of it is sapped by these school choice initiatives. And so I'm excited to talk a bit more about that. But before we get into that, let's talk about this infrastructure fight and this gang of center-right Democrats who are holding it up. Representative Josh Gottheimer is leading this gang of right-wing Democrats. They call themselves
the gang of squares.
Yeah, the gang of nerds. They call themselves the Mod Squad. I'm not kidding. And it's really an attempt to tank Joe Biden's agenda. Imagine for a second if progressives were the ones doing this, what the kind of uproar would be. But basically what it boils down to is that Gottheimer and this other group, or 8 other centrists, they want to pass just the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the one that passed the Senate, without the Democrats' only reconciliation package, the one that includes all the stuff that Democrats want to prioritize: child care, child tax credit extension, climate provisions, the expansion of Medicare to include dental, hearing, and vision. And this was agreed upon by Democratic leadership in the pursuit of this legislation. So, like, it was always going to be a dual track, and they were always going to be tied together. And this has been known for months and months and months. And this was a way to get progressives on board, too, because AOC and Jamal Bowman in the House, for example, Sanders in the Senate, who was instrumental in creating the framework for this legislation, like, they were not going to vote for just the bipartisan reconciliation bill. And so this was it's a mutually assured destruction situation. Now, Democratic leadership and the White House, they were all on board and still are on board for this dual track strategy that they'll be passed together. Again, this was known all along. They'll pass together or not at all. And yet Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, who represents a very wealthy suburb of the city, Tom Suozzi is another person on board with this, represents a wealthy suburb of the city as well in New York, on Long Island. Their pet project is this SALT deduction, which we'll get into in a second. But they're basically making a demand that this SALT deduction, which helps wealthy suburbs of the city and wealthy people in it, that needs to be addressed. And they're holding the entire reconciliation package hostage
it's a tax
for this
cut.
purpose.
It's called a deduction. It's a tax cut.
It's a tax cut, right. But, we've got to frame it in certain ways to protect certain people. So, Pelosi and Democratic leadership are actually understandably quite frustrated by this. There's a bit of a stalemate between the Gottheimer gang and Democratic leadership, because this is what we've known for many, many months was going to be the path forward. And it's odd to say Pelosi's on the right side of something, but she is in this instance. The standoff continues to be going on through today because the negotiations on the budget framework for the reconciliation package went deep into the night, and Gottheimer did not budge. So this is a very long prelude to show you this clip of Gottheimer on CNBC being asked about his decision to hold up this entire process for maintaining a tax benefit for rich people in blue states.
What does the final SALT compromise look like for you and your colleagues, Suozzi, and the other guys that think it's really important to change that? Would you accept a higher cap? Is that what it's going to be, do you think?
My position on that remains unchanged. We've talked about here before. Full reinstatement of the state and local tax deduction. There's no reason why we should be paying taxes twice. And this is a middle class issue here in northern New Jersey. Nope. And when we've talked about in Bergen County, the median property tax is over $15,000. So, people's taxes went up in 2017 when they gutted SALT. Now it's time to reinstate it and get people actually tax relief back here and get them tax cuts back here.
Tax relief.
You're talking about, a teacher and a firefighter who really will get relief when this gets done. And a third of New Jersey will benefit from it. So that's my fight on the reconciliation package. And we're going to focus on it, and we'll get that done too.
Well, you all constantly say you don't like higher taxes in general on anything. And that whole $3.5 trillion boondoggle, you're going to be voting for, taxes out the wazoo, Josh. And I just don't see how
we haven't actually seen. Let's look at the total impact on. I'm going to focus on one thing: the total impact on my district.
On Kelly,
I'm making sure that Kelly is okay.
Yeah, no, there's some. I just think it's such
we'll look
bad
at that.
messaging.
We've got to look at that when the legislation's written. There's no bill yet.
What?
So when the bill is written, we'll look at it.
I got to draw you out.
I think SALT is a problem. You can't be for SALT, but you're helping the wealthy. I'm sorry. There are a few teachers in town. They're married to people on Wall Street for the most part. I don't think it's helping a lot of the middle class.
Well, I'll introduce you to a lot of folks that I'm hearing from who are real middle class folks who need help.
Josh loves coming on in Faces, and we love having you, Josh.
Oh, well, he was not expecting that kind of response.
Not on that channel.
Right on CNBC. That's Kelly Evans, who basically just called him on his BS there with the framing. So he says this is a middle-class issue. Brookings Institute, the Tax Policy Center, which is respected, found that 20% of U.S. households receive the top 20%, I should say, receive 96% of the benefits from a unfettered SALT deduction. And it's really top heavy within that as well. The top 1% receive over 50% of the benefits from a full unlimited SALT deduction. So, he says, I'm just going to focus on one thing in that interview. And that's pretty much accurate. This guy, along with other members of this centrist bloc, are holding up the entire Biden infrastructure agenda, which, you know, not just the hard infrastructure, right? The bipartisan bill that won't, like, progressives have already said, and they have enough votes, they're not going to advance that unless the reconciliation bill is advanced. And then the flip side is happening with Gottheimer and this entire crew. Like, they are holding up that entire agenda for a tax cut for the wealthy, and that's how it needs to be framed. And it's also, as you say, it's as the anchor said, it's bad messaging just for purely the Democratic Party's electoral decisions. They're becoming a party that's catering more towards this specific suburban donor class. So that's part of maybe why, you know, you have more people signing on with this approach by Gottheimer than I think there should be. But it allows for, I saw an article of Chuck Grassley going after Democrats for supporting tax cuts for the rich with the SALT deduction, like incredibly hypocritical of Grassley to claim that, but they get to claim that because this, in this instance, it's the reality. It's the reality.
And I just think that this is on Biden, because what leverage do they really have? They're really going to sink all of this? Okay, do that. And then go try to figure out and try to win another election after doing that. I think the pressure needs, like, they'll need, like, and I think that you're seeing the right signs from the leadership, but ultimately this can't win because they don't have any leverage. This is just purely for corporate and suburban wealthy interests, generally speaking. And
they're yeah, right. But at the same time, like, there might be some compromise reach where there's a raising of what's allowed, or there's a compromise where they split the baby, which I think Pelosi would be primed to do, and I'm worried about that shoe dropping. There obviously should be zero repeal, but, you know, this could be a way for her to throw chum to this particular crowd, even though they're obsessing over pay-fors.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about pay-fors, as people know, but as long as the big bill gets out, that's what I care about. And if these people stand in the way, I think that it's just absurd.
Right. Gottheimer is one. I have a lot of things to say about him, but maybe I'll refrain.
Should hopefully an ex-Democrat at some point.
Right. And we should say that the DCCC is actually, for the first time in my career covering this stuff, is trying to hold these centrists accountable, and is threatening their reelection funds if they continue to go down this path of tanking the Democratic president's agenda. On the flip side, a lot of these representatives in this caucus had leftist primary challenges that Pelosi and leadership helped actively squash, her and Steny Hoyer. And now look what's happening. Karma a little bit, but it's not too sweet because it could really hurt the rest of us. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by Jon Hale to talk about education.
Thank you, Emma. Folks, you know, I know you're going to think I'm weird this way, but there is one of the best feelings I have. I mean, obviously, I love my kids and stuff like that, but going into the dentist and having them sort of surprised at the level of my personal dental hygiene. And it's not because I walk in there and they're like, oh, you don't look like a guy who has a good dental hygiene, just broadly speaking, from the way you carry yourself. It's just that I do a great job with dental hygiene because I take it seriously. I've dedicated myself. A couple of years ago, I realized, like, oh, my teeth are going to cost me $1 million if I don't start taking care of them, and I have been. And a big part of that has made it so much easier for me has been Quip. They're a design company that focused on dental hygiene. They've got great toothbrushes. They've got what I think is one of, like, the modern miracles of man in their reusable flosser, which they've never even given me copy to advertise about it, and I think it's the greatest thing ever been invented. They also have, like, that great Pez dispenser for the gum. They have really great products that were just designed to to make it easier for you to take care of your teeth well. And now, after 140 years of no changes in mouthwash, Quip has created a mouthwash that is giving you more of the ingredients that you need, and it comes in an eco-friendly refill bottle that is 100% recyclable. Like I say, you know Quip, they make this great toothbrush, they make the flossers, they make the gums that helps you with your bad breath and prevents cavities. And now their 4 times concentrate mouthwash has fluoride, xylitol, and CPC, but they left out the artificial colors and the stinging alcohol you find in a lot of the other rinses. And you get a customizable subscription. You can get refills automatically delivered straight to your door every 3 months. Quip's refill bottles are made from 100% recyclable plastic. Mouthwash is the perfect finishing touch to a complete oral care routine. You pair it with the Quip electric toothbrush for adults, and both my kids have them. The refillable flossers. Quip's great tasting, good for your gum. That can help keep your teeth clean between brushes. And bingo, bango, you can show up at your dentist and get the Sam Seder treatment. And if you go to getquip.com/majority5, right now you can get $5 off a mouthwash starter kit. That's $5 off a mouthwash starter kit, which includes a refillable dispenser, a 90-day dose supply of Quip's 4 times concentrated formula at getquip.com/majority5. Majority5. Spelled GETQUIP.com/majority5. Quip, the Good Habits Company. Emma, back to you.
We are back, and we would like to welcome to the program Jon Hale, author of The Choice We Face, The Origins of School Choice and the Demise of Public Education. Jon, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about your book because I feel like we're fighting the notion of school choice as this kind of egalitarian notion that plucks the most deserving children out of these awful public school systems on many sides, right? And your book touches on these multiple buckets. You got wealthy conservatives, you've got kind of liberals in cities who feel like they can fix this, and then there's kind of grassroots energy on the ground about some of this, which baffles me to an extent. But I guess let's just really start at the beginning, the notion of school choice, how this began really with Brown v. Board of Education. If we could start and then move towards the modern day.
Yeah, so, school choice as we know it really begins in the aftermath of the Brown decision, and people trying to resist desegregating schools. And, freedom of choice turns into the rhetoric of the right to choose where we go to school. But it becomes a way of talking about going to segregated schools without sounding racist, really. So, and it sort of builds from this racist policy to avoid going to desegregated schools into this form that we see today.
Right. And so I guess let's delineate for people some of the options that school choice allows, or the different sections of education that it divvied things up into. You got charter schools, magnet schools, but there are more options than that. What are they?
Yeah, so, in addition to magnets and charters, one of the more insidious options are vouchers. And we saw these in the 1950s, where you're using government money to fund families directly, and they can choose any school they want, more often than not religious private schools. So vouchers really lead to the privatization of schools. Now, during the pandemic, we see online education really taking off, and even homeschooling is an option of school choice.
Yeah, what Supreme Court decision allowed for, I'm blanking on it at this moment. Was there not a Supreme Court decision that was a bit contested about public funds via vouchers going to religious schools?
Yeah, so Zelman v. Harris in 2004 really sort of talk about how, we can use public funding.
Oh, I'm sorry, your audio cut out.
Yeah, we just lost your audio somehow, Jon. We'll maybe cut to a break real quick, and we'll start this audio out.
Oh wait, we hear you now.
Switched to something it wasn't supposed to.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, the Zelman v. Harris decision really allows public funding to go to families, and if they wanted to, they can choose to go to a private school. So with this, we see vouchers have a sort of legitimacy in the courts that it's actually legal to do this on smaller scales. But this is just one other choice option that's become validated by the Supreme Court. So we really see more choice in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and so there are a variety of different steps. I guess let's go back to Brown v. Board and some of the justifications that were used there. Like, it's so interesting to see it framed as choice, and for that framing to remain. Black families didn't have a choice. Like, black families were not a part of the choose whatever school you want to go to so you don't have to integrate your children with other black kids. Like, that was not an option. Talk about that concept and how heavily racialized it really was from the outset.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And from the very beginning, whites and privileged elite white families really used what they called freedom of choice to avoid desegregated schools. And it was designed by and for elite, wealthier white families to say, the government has no right to tell me where to go to school. And if I don't want to go to school, a desegregated school, if I don't want to go to school with Black students or students of color, I have a right of freedom of association, was the legal argument, to where I am choosing to spend my time with whom I choose to spend my time with. And upon this principle, they developed this idea of school choice. It's my choice where to go to school. The government cannot tell me where to go to school, and especially for some social experiment like desegregation, that families should have a right to opt out of that. So from the very beginning, it's a way to avoid desegregated schools. It's a way to dictate at your own level where you want to go to school. And from that, it just sort of builds upon that very principle. And to your point, you're exactly right, where people of color and Black families did not have that choice, right? They weren't involved in the process of coming up with freedom of choice, that we choose where to go. Black families just wanted to go to a school that they wanted to because they were prevented by law from attending that school. Freedom of choice is something very different that whites are using to avoid desegregation. So from the very start, it's a policy to avoid desegregation, and it's also a rhetorical way to talk about race without having to talk about it, right? So especially during busing in the 1970s, say, I don't want to go to that school because it's my choice not to go. You don't have to say you don't want to go to school with children of color. It's a more convenient way that's palatable across the nation.
Yeah, I'm reminded of other discussions we had on this show about the notion of taxpayer, right? Which is also heavily racialized. I'm contributing taxes. I own property during this era where property taxes the income tax wasn't around. I own property. I'm the one who's should be, and my people like me are the only people who should be having a say in our government, and everyone else should basically be grateful. These are just notions we repeat today. Choice, taxpayer, that have so much baggage and weight behind them in terms of like the racial resentment caked in to those terms. But your book talks about Milton Friedman a bit, and it all seems to come back to him in the end, unfortunately for us. He was a huge advocate for this concept back in the day. Talk about his influence over this debate.
Milton Friedman, and a lot of people are very upset to this day when you make this association. Milton Friedman was critical in bringing school choice to a national level, because up until this point, you had segregationists in Virginia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, the former Confederacy, using freedom of choice as a way to very blatantly avoid going to desegregated schools. Milton Friedman, as an award-winning economist in the University of Chicago, provides gravitas, a way to talk about school choice at a different level. And when he starts talking about it, folks in Chicago, New York, Boston, northern cities have new language to use when desegregation comes to their cities. So when Chicago and Boston don't want to desegregate, Milton Friedman's talking about an educational marketplace. He's talking about the right of taxpayers to use their own money in ways that they see fit. So Milton Friedman provides a new language to not sound like Southern segregationists. He provides a new way of talking about it. And he also provides this economic theory, which says, let's put competition into this public school system. Let's provide innovative teaching and innovative schools to improve the whole system. So he's introducing not only a new way of talking about it, but in a new theory about how we should run schools. And this is what's really taken off today.
Well, you can see very prominent shades of that in the way that like liberals in the North talk about school choice. We saw during the same time, as you write, a mass exodus of white people, particularly affluent white people from cities to suburbia, which I think also was paired with the notion that public education can be circumvented for my special child. So I guess talk about his influence over that particular regional discourse and a bit of how that still remains today.
Yeah, so Milton Friedman, in choice itself allows people to, use a new way of talking about it, where I have a right to go to school wherever I want to go. And especially as taxpayers, right? I'm allowed to move to the suburbs now and go to schools and have a stronger say where I want to go. So in many ways, it becomes this sort of worldview that people have about schools. Schools should be run like a business. And as a taxpayer, as a consumer, I have a right to determine what that product should look like. And it's very influential, especially in the North, because in the city of Chicago, for instance, we have massive white flight out of the city. And we have these arguments about taxpayers. Well, I pay taxes and we should have a stronger say in how this works, right? So it's it's a different way of talking about it than the Southern segregation approach, which is to put police in front of the doors and not allow Black children into the school. It's an economic argument that people use that benefits supposed taxpayers, which is coded for whiteness, right? If you're a legitimate citizen, if you're paying taxes, that's a way to sort of say that, and to use taxpayers, that phrase itself is a way to talk about it. So it's privileging white wealthy families to determine what our school system looks like at a time when it should become more equitable, because that's what the Brown decision said.
Well, it's also just enthusiastically embracing like the purest form of that Friedmanomics neoliberal economic ideology and applying it to these like basic social foundational structures that should be completely immune from that kind of thinking. Unfortunately for us, it wasn't that way over the past few decades.
Well, and also the idea that, it's based on this assumption that, when you look at an education marketplace, it's all based on the assumption that these parents or these individuals or consumers, to draw on this language and rhetoric, will act rationally. But as Friedman's writing this in the city of Chicago, he can see white vigilante groups attacking Black families who are moving into white neighborhoods. He can see apartments in Cicero burning. He can see Dr. King talking about Chicago being worse than any place in the South that he's ever visited. People are not acting rationally when they're choosing and selecting schools. So that argument goes out the window when you can just look outside of his office at University of Chicago and see people acting not only irrationally, but violently to avoid going to desegregated schools. So the whole theory is corrupt from the start, because people will not act rationally when it comes to where they send their kids to school.
Jon, you sound like you're being very irrational. I'm joking.
Right, yeah. You can see the mail I'm getting too.
Right, exactly. Hey, I'm familiar with that. So let's just really then talk about the role of both parties in kind of pushing this to the fore. We can start with Reagan, who promulgated a lot of this. Clinton, of course, No Child Left Behind under Bush, Obama's achievement gap stuff, and then, Betsy DeVos being you're in the Midwest, right? Like, she's so prominent there. We can take it step by step. Let's start with Reagan. all of these presidents and their parties being very instrumental in pushing this concept to where we are today.
Yeah, so in you're outlining, the sort of trajectory of what this looks like. So let's start with Milton Friedman, right? Milton Friedman becomes an economic advisor to none other than Barry Goldwater, right? Barry Goldwater is basically just articulating what Friedman tells him to in terms of economic policy. So the ideas of an education marketplace and their individual choice, the right of the taxpayer, right, really becomes baked into this new Republican Party that we begin to see in the 1960s. So Nixon can champion these policies when he's elected to president. And Nixon is president when busing is a constitutional means at the time to achieve a level of desegregation. So now Nixon can talk about taxpayers being opposed to busing, or the right of association, the right to choose where to go to school. So it becomes even more popular when the northern cities are faced with desegregation. But Northerners don't necessarily want to sound, again, like a Southern segregation. So they don't say, I'm opposed to busing. But what they mean is, I'm opposed to desegregation. I'm opposed to sending my kids across the city to go to school, right? Well, I'm opposed to desegregation. It's a way to talk about it. So it becomes more popular. And then Reagan, probably the pinnacle of the Republican Party in terms of its transformation. In his 1980 education plan, he wants to privatize the system. He wants to bring vouchers back. And there's now congressional support for it. But it's not just a Republican issue. As we talked about, on all sides of the political spectrum is supportive of school choice. Because by the 1980s, when white flight has decimated the public school system, people are afraid to go to public schools because the press, a largely white press, has painted schools as these very, very violent spaces. We also see a school prison nexus in police officers in public schools for the first time. A lot of white people are afraid to go to public schools. So Democrats, especially Southern Democrats, Bill Clinton, right? William Winters, Bill Riley in South Carolina, they're adopting these school choice plans to allow their constituents to go to a public school that makes them feel safe, that makes them feel better, because they grew up in the desegregation era. They saw it and they know what rhetoric is going to work for their base. So all of the, and then some of, like Bill Clinton's becoming president, he is the first Democrat to pass federal legislation and federal funding for charter schools. So we can't let Democrats off the hook too, because with Clinton comes in federal support for school funding. And of course, with President Obama, he increases the funding for charter schools. He's supportive of the idea of school choice. His Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, comes from Chicago that has been privatized through charter schools and other schools of choice. So it's part and parcel a bipartisan policy of school choice. And we can't forget that when we're talking about it. There's not one person, one group of people or constituents who are for it. It's across the spectrum.
Well, it's just the branding, right? There's the sanitized Friedmanomics version that the Democratic Party espouses. And then, it's still sanitized to a degree on the right, but it's a bit more obvious what they're trying to do, which is kind of pretty part and parcel of the ideologies or the way that each party brands themselves anyway. But I'm interested in how this kind of rise of the billionaire philanthropists, philanthropists, I say in quotes, like Bill Gates or, the Waltons pouring a bunch of money into education. The Gatesian philosophy seems to be very heavily influencing the Democratic side of things. And I think we're having a bit of a reckoning about that, how wrong that was, given, for example, what you've seen in Chicago. But it's not enough. The fact that there were mass school closures and Rahm Emanuel left office in disgrace, that should probably show people, or not even in disgrace, I guess he has a cushy job as a commentator now, but with very low approval ratings. That should basically be show this was a failure, but we're still not necessarily there to the degree we should be.
We should be. If we read not only my book, right? Here's a self plug for that, but also all of the research on school choice that shows that there's major there's a major failure at hand here and we're not seeing it. It would be easier, I think, for people to see that, not only if they just dug a little bit more instead of just buying into the rhetoric of choice, but the problem is the public schools themselves aren't doing the job. So because if I'm very critical of school choice, obviously, but I'm also willing to recognize that public schools aren't doing what it's supposed to do, because people, the American public, taxpayers, right, have backed away from the notion of a public good through public schools. So through generations of moving away from public schools, of talking about school choice, of insisting on vouchers and privatization, that has weakened the public school system to the extent where it can't meet people's needs. It can't meet their interests and desires. So we're trying to prop up a system that's been defeated and deflated since the Brown decision. So yes, Democrats can point to and say, yeah, this is not working very well. What else can we try? And Americans, we want a quick fix. School choice, a new charter school, a voucher to go to a private school. That's a quick fix. That's a silver bullet that a lot of people want. So no wonder why, yes, if you do the research, we should be against school choice more. But when you look at what public schools, we've decimated that system. So it's really hard to sort of say, yeah, school choice is wrong, but let's go back to public schools. We're in a really tough bind right now. So yeah, I'd like to think that we should do that, but the pandemic has further ravaged public school system and more people want out of public schools. So it is a moment of reckoning now. And unfortunately, I really don't think we've come to a full reckoning that we need to yet.
I should say too that Rahm Emanuel is going to be an ambassador to Japan. So not just a cushy job on ABC, but rewarded by the Biden administration for the job that he's done. And you're absolutely right. It's like asking somebody, like starving somebody and giving them maybe 2 saltine crackers every 3 days and then saying, okay, go run a marathon. And then being like, why are they not able to run the marathon? That's what we were asking them to do all along. So I want to, I guess, talk a bit more about the pandemic and your perception of how this has moved the conversation around school choice and vouchers and charter schools. Because a lot of the kids need to go back to school crowd seems to be fairly on the affluent side. And then you also have responses like, here in New York, Eric Adams, when running for office, said, oh, the pandemic showed that we could essentially have 1 teacher for every 300 kids, right? Like the wheels are turning in the Bill Gates types. Like, how can we streamline this and pair with Bloomberg or pair with Google and make it a technological achievement to cut costs and educate our kids in this like crystallized way? Like, there's a very scary road that this could go down.
Yeah, and we're already going down that path. And what's scary is that all the research prior to the pandemic, there's a lot of debate and research and interpretation about what we can do about the charter schools. The majority are still performing worse than traditional public schools overall, right? But what was clear from all the research was that online education, all day online education, is a failure. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. And then the pandemic hits, and now we see this as probably one of the most viable options in terms of public health and safety, right? So it's going against what the research says. Some online education can work in small doses after school in specialized classes, but not as a substitute for traditional face-to-face. But the pandemic has taken away that, right? Or in many ways, ability to go to school all day. So we see policies flying in the face of this research about online instruction. But not only that, people are so unhappy with their local public school because it's become dangerous, it's become unsafe. At the same time, some people want to send their kids there because they have to go back to work now, right? So our schools have become so contentious that it just makes it so much harder to run that marathon that you're referring to. You know, the 2 saltines are now 1 saltine because of the pandemic. So it's just exacerbated the problem. It's made it much worse. The perception of public school is dropping even further because of the pandemic. And some of this too, in the cities where we're fortunate enough to have teacher unions, right? Teacher unions are being bashed. Look at the city of Chicago. So it's become more and more demonized by parents because they're not getting what they want out of the public school. So what's convenient? School choice. Let's pull out, right? And one thing about Gates, literally opening the gates to business-minded reform. Let's run it like a business. Let's partner with other businesses. Let's put this in the private sector. All of these ideas are music to the ears of people who aren't getting what they want out of public schools. And these are largely white families who have the ability to pull out at any time they want. And we see them calling the shots more than the actual research.
You mentioned it's largely white families, but there are grassroots activism from non-white families that are advocating for charter schools or vouchers in a different way. A lot of this, what I would imagine, is just kind of the chain reaction due to the underfunding of our public schools, and like black families, like white families, want the best outcome for their child. And so with this perception of public schools, to me, it's not shocking that you have these like pockets of activism bubbling up from people who just want better outcomes for their individual child or children they know. Is that an accurate assessment of kind of what's happening, at least downstream from this?
Yeah, it is accurate to point out how Black families and families of color are embracing school choice as a way to improve education for their families and communities. And that makes sense when you put it in a longer historical context, because, you know, Black families and families of color have been denied education since prior to the Civil War and enslavement. They were literally denied an education. And then it was segregated, right? And when you segregate or deny people an entry to public schools, privatization of private schools is an option. So Black families and educators have relied on private schools long before white families have, right? So it's sort of a part of educational resistance to provide an education by any means necessary. So during the Jim Crow era, for instance, that was called building a private school or Rosenwald school. During the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power era, that's called a community-controlled school, building a school and providing the best education you can because white educators aren't doing it. Now it's conflating the terms with school choice, right? But if a civil rights grassroots activist is demanding to run their own school and it happens to be called a charter school, that's very different than Bill Gates or someone practicing, a Milton Friedman notion of running a school. That's very different. That's about for-profit. That's about creating partnerships with Google or something like that. It's very different than saying, we need to control our own school for the survival of our community. Very different, same rhetoric, but very different purpose or rationale for school choice.
It's a great point. So you're talking a lot about Chicago. I know you're in Illinois, and basically I think that what Emanuel did was as close to what we've gotten in a major city, like a full experiment about school choice as seen by the Milton Friedman types. So can you make the case about what it would truly look like to have choice as a fully funded education platform, basically, that being the dominant and actual way that we funded education, just basically as a free market choice option? What would that look like? Because it seems like it would be a lot worse than what we saw in Chicago, and that was pretty bad.
Yeah, and Emanuel has really taken a toll. And then let's not forget Arne Duncan, right, who President Obama brought with him to Washington to run schools. And Chicago was a case in point that this wasn't going to work. They're trying to get rid of teachers' unions or to take their authority in determining what education should look like in the classroom. So they're attacking unions, right, which we've seen played out across the nation. And also this idea, we see it in Chicago, but to a lesser extent, like New Orleans is a classic example. I look at the book, Memphis, Charleston, South Carolina. These are choice systems where everyone can put in a choice where they want to go. And we see what's happening. It's devastating. Privilege and wealth determine who gets to go in the best schools, because school choice, like a business, you can only serve so many consumers or customers than you have the physical space for. Well, what happens? Who do you think gets into those schools? It's the people who apply first. It's the people who know people making the decisions. sometimes like a magnet school, the best magnet schools in Charleston, South Carolina, you have to take a test to get into the magnet school. And now there's an industry around taking these tests to pass the tests. Well, who can afford to take these prep tests?
Right.
It's people with wealth, which in this country is traditionally white families. So the very system the very notion that it's an equal system, that we all have an equal say, is flawed from the start, because it requires money and it requires capital to take advantage of these supposed choices that we have. And again, we see not everyone has equal access to that capital to get on the equal footing that we need to make the best choices. And one other thing I'll say too, I interviewed a woman who from Japan, studying chemistry at the University of Chicago, right? So English is a second language. She's studying chemistry at the University of Chicago. She said trying to figure out Chicago's school choice system was more difficult than any PhD course she took at the University of Chicago, that it was so taxing and trying to figure out the process to get into it. Just can tell you how difficult these choices are. Nothing like the equal sort of, oh, let's just go to like a supermarket. Let's just go pick whatever we want that's best for us. In practice, it's nothing like that.
I remember that movie vaguely, Waiting for Superman, or was that the one? I mean,
Superman,
that didn't seem like it was a fun choice situation, but I don't remember fully actually the movie, so perhaps I shouldn't cite it. That's a good rule. Then I want to ask you about the flip side of that. What would it look like if all of this money was just put into a fully funded public system? I mean, how much would that simplify everything and improve outcomes?
Well, it would make a world of difference if we properly invested it. I'll say one, that's such a hard argument to make, because Friedman or Friedmanomics, right? This notion is that people will literally say, I've gotten into debates about this on more than one occasion, that the argument is we have enough money, or we even have too much money, that too much money is going into the system and it's not efficient because it's not run like a business. So you have to fight this argument that we have enough money. And look at the anti-union rhetoric. A lot of people are saying we're spending too much on teacher salaries, but you ask any teacher in the United States, they're going to need better working conditions that requires greater investment. But what would it look like? It would improve substantially if we invested in those who are going to a public school, who are committed to public schools, who have a history and track record of working to improve public schools. We know the solutions. We've been studying this problem for hundreds of years. We know the families and activists who want to improve schools. It's not just throwing money at public schools. It's investing in those individuals who know the solutions, who are there every single day, every night during the summer. Let's invest in those people who have the solutions, as opposed to the Bill Gates, as opposed to the business owners who are going in and proposing charter schools, as opposed to those who have these sort of chain charter schools, right? Let's invest in those who are closest to the public schools, because they know the solutions, and this investment would really pay off with those who actually know what's going on.
Well, yeah, and I think obviously there are a few disincentives for the people involved in this as a business, right? They want it to be as profitable as possible. I guess we could talk about some of the profit motives and how that bastardizes the entire notion of public education or education in general. And also how they bump up against teachers' unions. You've touched on that a bit, but I think that's really instrumental to understanding this dynamic. There is a deep resentment from a lot of these folks about teachers' unions, which is the undercurrent for many of these discussions, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's like across the United States, there's this underlying sort of point of tension that we have with teacher unions, and we've had that tension existing in this country since the origination of teacher unions, that we really see the rise in the late 1960s, 70s, and 1980s. Ronald Reagan made that a part of his platform, but even, in no surprise, even before that, Milton Friedman was speaking out against teacher unions where they existed, and unions in general, that this was going to infect the marketplace, that this is going to make an unequal marketplace. Chester Finn, for instance, conservative education reformers continually go back to teacher unions as the problem. They are the roadblocks. They're the impediments to quality public education reform. Speaking of waiting for Superman, Michelle Rhee was profiled as the solution to guiding reform. And her, she of course was attacking teacher unions that they were getting in the way of reform. So yeah, this school choice, right? And teacher unions have spoken out against it loudly and backed by research, right? Are being demonized, right? So it's part of being pro-choice, pro-school choice, sorry, is being anti-union as well. And ironically enough, and this is sort of the caveat on history, and I have a piece coming on this too, Al Shanker and the teacher unions were the first to propose charter schools because they envisioned teacher-led charter schools for up to 5 years to find solutions that work and then go back to the public school system. It was a way to give actually teachers more power. But the way history played out, they wrote teachers and teacher unions out of that to take power away. It's much easier and it's more efficient in terms of the cost to hire, right, a Teach for America graduate, if you will, or a Teach for America teacher than it is to hire a fully credentialed, well-educated professional teacher. It's just much more efficient. You mentioned talk about, we now learn that we can have one teacher for 50 plus students, much more efficient according to the marketplace. But get rid of the unions in order to make that happen. So you're exactly right. There's this underlying anti-union sentiment that supports school choice.
So you mentioned that charter school outcomes are on average worse. I guess to lastly to wrap things up, talk about those outcomes and what's been found thus far.
Well, it's how you interpret the data, and I talk about this in the book. I mean, you could look at numbers, and Bill Gates was touting some of this research that said 40% of charter school students are doing better than public school students in math. And the numbers show 40, even upwards of 44%, which, considering that charter schools we really started them in 30 years ago this year, that's pretty, in one way, that's pretty good. 44% are doing well, but let's reverse that number, right? 56% of your students going to a charter school are not being served by your charter school, and they would be better off going to a traditional public school, right? Or look at other numbers, which show that the numbers of charter schools that are closing in particular in cities in the middle of a school year because they ran out of funding or they're accused of fraud. We lose these individual stories of what it's like to go to a failing charter school when we focus on that 40% number. We lose what it means to go to a failing school or a private school that has every right to close up shop whenever they want to and send you off to a different school. Those narratives and those stories are so profound. Public school has to accept everybody who comes to its public doors, no matter what. They will always be there. It's not necessarily the same for a charter school. So yes, the majority of students are still being better served by a traditional public school, as problematic or as much of a struggle it can be. They're still being better served by a traditional system that has been here for hundreds of years, right? They will better serve the public than any privatized notion of education, no doubt about it.
Jon Hale, author of The Choice We Face, The Origins of School Choice and the Demise of Public Education. Thanks so much for your time, Jon, today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and be back in a second. We are back. Thanks everybody for continuing to tune in. We've got a little bit more of a show for you today, so off to Fox News we go. We've got a new fixation, folks. It's not a tan suit this time. It's not a coffee cup salute. Not even the crime of mustard on a burger. It's a nervous laugh. Kamala Harris's nervous laugh and the curious case of the timing of that laugh. And does that even make her a patriot? Does she love America because of the timing of this laugh? You'll have to see what the people over at Fox News have to say about it.
Hey, Sandra, let's now bring in Washington Times opinion editor and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt to talk more about this. And Charlie, I wanted to start off with this piece of video that we've been running all day today of Kamala Harris being asked on her Asia trip about Afghanistan, where she seems to laugh off the question from a reporter. Listen here.
Hey, listen, so I'm going to, hold on. Slow down, everybody. I want to talk about two things. First, Afghanistan. We couldn't have a higher priority right now.
Okay,
so Charlie, I don't know if that's just a nervous tick.
Just like, okay, so I watch this and I think, okay, the laugh must be coming later, right? The question that she laughed off and it was so outrageous. She's walking up as a plane is blaring and she starts laughing saying, wait, hold on 1 second, I'm going to make an opening statement. Yes, her laugh is a little weird. It's a tick. I don't care. But like,
I'll just say it's a liability. Like her nervous laughter, and it's fabricated here, but it was evident during the primary that she laughs when she's nervous. And I just think, like, if you're going to be, say, possible president in the future, and you need to say, hey, Kamala, there's news that a hospital in Iran has some weird sabotage issues. We need you to go out and deny that we had any part of it. And she breaks out in a big grin. It's going to be a problem. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, it is. Sure, it's gonna be this kind of liability in terms of like, oh, Hillary's so annoying and look at her laugh, and we're gonna make this back-to-back montage of it, and I'm sure right-wing media is gonna obsess about it. But like, the idea that they're genuinely concerned about her response to Afghanistan, they actually are genuinely think she's laughing off the risks that Americans are facing in Afghanistan, like, oh my lord. But we'll continue. Let's hear the unhinged commentary.
On her part, or if it's a way of her taking a beat to gather her thoughts, but it just seems so misplaced, particularly in this case when, as Sandra was pointing out, we had that story of the mother who dropped a 2-year-old child in the rush to get to the airport gates, and the child was trampled to death under the feet of so many hundreds of people who were rushing the gates as well.
Well, precisely, John. I mean, you know, I think that you're probably right that it is sort of an effort to sort of gather her thoughts. And after all, she was being asked specifically about Afghanistan when she shushed the reporter and said, hold on a second, and then begins to talk about Afghanistan and answer the question. But it really is, it does reveal a terrible sense of politics, a terrible sense of the seriousness of the situation that the country is concerned about right now in Afghanistan. And
it is so funny to do that instead of reporting.
I know. Well, okay, so they mentioned the child that tragically died in Afghanistan, right? If the reporter had asked her about the death of a child and she started laughing, okay, maybe you'd have a case. But like, it's interesting that they're going down this road. It seems like Kamala Harris, given the fact that we know that she is a pretty fake politician and does not come off well, in my view, and if she chooses to run for president in 2024, I think she's gonna run into some issues because of that. But regardless, like, the fact that this is what they're focusing on is interesting. It's of course laced with misogyny. It's of course laced with racism, and it's like no surprise that they're doing these same kinds of Obama type attacks about like very small aspects of the way she conducts herself in relation to national security. Oh, he's saluted with the coffee cup. That means he loves the Taliban. Like, that they're doing this with her. And not even necessarily with Biden. Yeah, they're trying to say Biden is beholden to the far left and he's falling apart and he can't remember anything. There is a specificity for this kind of attack that they're reserving for Kamala Harris, and unfortunately, I think it's going to catch on. But part of that is her fault, because she is a fake politician. Regardless, doesn't get more ridiculous than this. All right, folks, that's our time for today. We will see you tomorrow. But we're still here. We're still here for the non-Peacock audience.
Indeed. Oh. And look who else is here.
Know me?
There she is.
Whoa. I don't see her yet.
She's making her way through the
Zoom obstacle
sort of
course
tubes at this point right now.
Right. the tubes. Aluminum tubes. Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
It's
How
just
goes it
me today. Hi.
But Sam's on screen. I'm so confused. What's the deal?
Well, he's not on screen. We're just wiring my audio through his computer. So that's
Got it. That's back end stuff. That's insider talk for everybody. I know you're jealous, but
there you go.
I got the ins.
Yeah, it's just virtual Sam is part of our infrastructure at this point.
Might be better than real life Sam, maybe.
I mean, he's a lot easier to deal with, I'll be honest.
Right. He doesn't say too much. The other Sam does seem to talk a lot. But
not really stressed out either.
Yeah, this fake computer Sam doesn't seem to get that angry about tech issues. Although I can't even speak because I've had we had tech issues on Friday and I was in a cold sweat for 3 hours just in quiet rage about it, and no one did anything wrong. It's just the camera malfunctioned. I know you know the pain, Nomi.
Oh, I do. I was 5 minutes before this, I was fighting with the Wi-Fi gods. I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Just when you think you have it right, there's always something. There's something.
Right. Yes, always something. What is happening over on the Nomiki show?
I don't know. We're filming from Greece. We're just doing the show. No. We have
no, you have a very special guest you can't tell us about tomorrow. That's how you frame it.
No, we have, as everybody knows, we've been doing a lot of international stuff since I've been in Greece. And actually, I want to do a little plug because we are going to post something special. I think today is the day we're posting. It's Tuesday, yeah. And it is an interview we did with it was with Arun Chowdhury, who has the committee program on Mondays on our channel, and he does international work, and he was the creative director for Bernie Sanders, and also my dear friend Dimitri, who is a former advisor to the prime minister here in Greece, and he talks about just sort of where the left is going in Europe and how leftist movements, obviously it's very different per country, but it's a special. It's really fascinating conversation. We taped it actually a little while ago, but it's probably even more relevant right now. So go to youtube.com/thenomikisha, go check it out. You're not going to get that anywhere else. I got to tell you, I think what's unique to our little situation is most of the people we bring on have done the work on the ground, and a lot of us have done the work on the ground in these different places. I see these memes go up being oh, you guys are all just talking heads. What are you talking about? We've actually done the organizing on the ground, and we're talking heads. That's a lot of work. So
there you go.
If you want to see it, go check it out.
Double the fun. Matt, what's happening over on Lek Reckoning, right? That's what it's called?
No, Left Reckoning tomorrow night. We have Chip Gibbons, a journalist focused on civil liberties, talking about a couple things, Assange, Daniel Hale, and we play an old Nixon tape from the morning Nixon found out about the Pentagon Papers. And we also talk about how to deal with this weird era we're in, where the left is always and even now concerned about right-wing collaboration with law enforcement, but also when law enforcement is using right-wing extremism as a sort of way to pad their budgets. How do we walk that line and react to what we're seeing, particularly with violence on the streets, and stoked on by a major political party? So that tomorrow night, Wednesday, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the post game. And go subscribe to the YouTube, folks.
Do that. And I guess we'll just head into the fun half. We'll take some calls. We'll have some fun in the fun half, such as the name 646-257-3920. See you guys there.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder, what a fucking nightmare.
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
and the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African, and the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Welcome to the fun half, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to read some IMs, take some calls, do some clips. Turkey Pak. Have you heard about Cuomo's dog? I did.
I want to play devil's advocate on this one. This is so crazy. I'm sorry. I've never been on the side of Cuomo, but I do think
establishment shill. Continue.
Yes, I'm waiting for the memes to come out right now. So I am always skeptical of anything that comes from the New York Post. And like the problem with the New York Post is it publishes something and then it just gets repeated like it's the truth. And I was reading it, and when I like actually read into it, because he was so in love with his dog, and like a man when he's down, seems like he wouldn't abandon his dog. Like that's I don't even think it's because he's inhumane or a narcissist or just like a bad person. I think he actually needs his dog. So what I read was he's going on vacation and looking for somebody in his orbit was taking care of his dog. But of course the New York Post pounced on it. So I just want to give a little bit of empathy. I know it's easy
That's pretty measured and probably exactly what happened.
It's absolutely insane if you leave your dog, the one that he was obsessed with. I mean, like I monitor Cuomo probably more than like the top 5 monitors of Cuomo too.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was unaware of if he actually liked the dog. But you know, it would be very, very Trumpian of him just kind of to actually secretly hate dogs and not want one around you. He only wanted it for the photo op and then time to go. But I think you're right. That's probably what the situation is, even though it's a more fun story to think about him abandoning the dog. Ray, don't know if you guys can do anything on your end, but I tried to watch Emma's interview on lab-created cell meat on Peacock, but it keeps going back to the previous episode. There's nothing we can do. But maybe I'll let them know. Nerd Cheetah, school choices, the clever language, those looking to turn a public resource and endeavor into an all-you-can-afford market that further erodes commitment to others. Yes. Lee NYC, black families were involved in pushing vouchers. I touched on this in the interview a little bit. The leading proponents in Wisconsin, the first state to impose vouchers, was a black woman from Milwaukee who was discussing with the public schools there. yes, we talked about how like that's very, even though as on principle we don't want that to be the norm, that's very different than a Bill Gates funded charter school that is like astroturfing and attempting to generate grassroots support in this artificial way in order to streamline technology and enrich a bunch of people. That's very, very different. Nerd Cheetah again. Yes, public good through public schools. My union needs to grow a set and start fighting for this. Josh from Connecticut. Emma, will you be attending Henrik Lundqvist's number retirement when it happens? Do I want to spend all of my savings on that? No. But I will say I'm going to my first Giants game in 2 years. It's outdoors, so I feel a little bit comfortable about it, more comfortable. And by chance, I had already bought the tickets. It's going to be the game that Eli Manning's jersey is getting retired at. So I'm very, very, very excited about that. There will be tears. And like the value of my tickets just exploded by 3 times or something like that. So I paid a very little amount for what I'm getting. That would be your probably idea since you have no interest in going to the game. For me, it's like I've been looking forward to it and counting down the days for a long time now. I haven't been to a live sporting event in 2 years, and so like that's those things are big deals for me,
Watch out. They're going to put there's going to be another New York Post article about how Emma Vigeland is a complete hypocrite. She was outside not wearing masks, and God forbid, she doesn't believe that COVID exists. Can we just like mention this? I just need like a moment to vent about this. What is it about conservatives doesn't understand? They don't understand like being outside is different than being inside. And also being inside with vaccinated people, also will still wear a mask with the vaccinated people. It's still different than being inside with other people who are not vaccinated and not wearing masks.
Yes.
Why don't they understand this?
They do. It's just like a way to get a quick New York Post headline type thing where you can feel like superior. Look, they're hypocrites and they're really just, not honest advocates for
they
their
don't
causes,
even believe it.
And they don't believe it. So.
Listen, Andrew Cuomo's dog was not wearing a mask when he was begging to get into the car when Andrew Cuomo was going off to his vacation.
Yeah, he's an anti-vaxxer. I heard that dog.
Mm-hmm.
So good thing he left him behind. Prairie Friar Kowalski from Nebraska. Howdy, Emma, Nomiki, Matt, and MR crew. Just a friendly reminder from my local livestock veterinarian. Please refrain from using horse medication to treat COVID-19. Yes. We don't advocate for that on this show, unlike other shows. Due to shortages from the supply chain issues, we don't want patriotic, freedom-loving horses to suffer from boomer centaurs. They think transgender is a hard concept, and the anti-vax crowd out here being trans species. Boomers made fun of Zoomers eating Tide Pods for the meme, while boomers are thinking they are owning the libs by taking worm medication for 1,500-pound horses. It's like a nationwide midlife crisis. Trump voice. Sad left is poggers. Left ain't scared of needles. He would never say ain't, but Kowalski, it's a good...
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Rob from Dedham. Eli Manning is the worst quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
This is just going to be like sports IMs, basically.
No.
Trent Dilfer. It's fine. Just tell me when I need it.
Trent Dilfer won the Super Bowl. Jesus Christ. And Eli Manning.
God.
You want to say he's the worst quarterback to ever win 2 Super Bowls? Okay. Virtual Sam also saying, I love the synthwave purple Nomiki background. There you go.
It's just for you guys.
Joe Judge writes in, Biden approval at 41% approval. According to Gold Standard pollster, I thought ending the wars was supposedly popular. I don't know about that figure.
His approvals are down. They every day they're coming out with different. But again, It's like I think I have a theory on this, Emma, and I'll probably build on it a little bit more as the weeks come on because it's like a little bit too preconceived. But I'll just leave this part. This part of the theory I think is true. I think that the Biden administration is, much of the foreign policy team that he has built is his team from his 40 years of, and I'm not defending his foreign policy, I just think this is where his mindset is.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the mistakes that were made in the Obama administration, like for instance, Obama would be like, should I have actually intervened in Syria? or done something in Syria. For all of us non-interventionists, we're all about non-intervening until we look at Syria. And then that's when you have this like other version of the left that's like, oh, there's no actual like, Assad's a great person. What are you talking about? So that's like calling out their lie. So I think what he's doing is he's just riding the wave of negative approvals until it can flip over. And potentially what I think is probably gonna happen is, as a lot of people have said this, is China's gonna put in their forces because it's to protect their financial interests. The horrifying aspect of this is that it's to what extent. And that's the part that we should hold on until have a little bit more information.
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, I find it interesting that certain media folks who have always been, and not just since the Trump years, have always been very favorable to like the Obama administration and the Clinton foreign policy, and Clinton's foreign policy takes were very different than Biden's foreign policy takes, but they're not the first to just turn on the neoliberal foreign policy, which is, let's be markedly clear, very different than the neocon foreign policy. Neocon, invade, make money. Neoliberal is just like frozen in time. We don't know what to do. We're still, this is very obviously very general assessment here, but it's not the same. And I think that's something we have to be very clear is neocons and neoliberals do not have the same foreign policy. Now, you and I don't have the same foreign policy as any of them, but I think it's very interesting that there are several people like the Daily Beast and like the New York Times who've always been very rah, who immediately turned and used the gender defense in a way that, echoes the right wing, which may or may not have been something that like the Biden administration anticipated.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating that this is like the coalescence that we're seeing. I mean, this is the outrage that is reserved for the consequences of the withdrawal is entirely like disproportionate to a non-existent outrage about the consequences of the 20-year occupation, the violence that we did. And like, there's very little introspection on that. And a lot of that I think has to do with, and we talked about this on the show a bit, like the relationship these national security reporters have with their sources and what they see their role as in relation to them. And it's not pretty. And it's still not pretty. It hasn't been pretty since the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War at its outset and the War on Terror. And it seems to have very little reckoning with oneself. They've seemed to have reckoned with it very little since then, which is discouraging.
But I think the big question is like the left is rightfully so. I'm not distancing from that, but like rightfully so obsessed with what got us here, but not putting enough attention in where do we go from here? And that was, I think that was what the Obama administration was very conscious of, the fact that they made mistakes in not necessarily having the right solutions or internal debates between how to get out of Iraq, what are the solutions for the Clinton and Biden had a notorious fight over what to do with Iraq when it came to foreign policy. And then obviously with Libya, like no boots on the ground. Okay, great. But then like who's to defend the borders that, or even weapons facilities or oil facilities so that ISIS doesn't come in and use them. Exactly. So like we sit here and we say we won't, but it's already the toothpaste out of the tube. So now what? Now what? I'm not saying that you put boots on the ground. I'm not saying you don't put, I'm just saying now what? And that's the conversation I think we as a more sophisticated left need to be willing to have because the reality is that when we do gain power, we are going to inherit dozens of years of failed foreign policy in which we need to provide solutions for. And the solution is never going to be throw our hands up in the air. Like we're not an island. So what do we do?
The solution is allowing for the self-determination of Afghanistan, which I understand is not necessarily possible with the Taliban, but this is also just part of like what was kept at bay by us for this period of time. And this was naturally given the fact that we propped up a government that was not necessarily functional and was using US dollars and was threadbare at best. These are the consequences of that, and this is going to have to play out. Like the withdrawal was never going to be pretty. You just open the doors for refugees. I think that's all you can.
Open the doors without a doubt. We need to be opening our doors to refugees. Absolutely. But self-determination, right? is something that is essentially a democratic principle. And that is arguably what the neoliberals were pushing for when they wanted to push all these NGOs, which were flawed and chaotic and money funneling and contract funneling. Okay, there, I'll put that on the table. If progressives want to think about what to do moving forward, dismantle the NGO complex of like friends and families get their contracts, et cetera, with the agenda of stabilizing a place so that they can self-determine. I mean, that is ultimately what the neoliberal agenda was self-determination in Libya, self-determination in Iraq, through democracy. Self-determination is democracy.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think that you can solve some of this with diplomacy in a way that, like, the Biden administration may want to re-engage in a more serious way. So, like, I guess that's really what I would do. But I think the first step, and then dealing with the fallout, is the withdrawal, and then you kind of have to regroup. But like, I have few complaints about how Biden handled this. I wish he made it a bit more of an expansive critique of colonialism and of imperialism in and of itself. But you know, that otherwise, I'm pleased with how he stood firm. I really am, and I'm surprised that given the makeup of his foreign policy team, that this was the conclusion reached. Pleasantly so. So
actually not surprised. I think there's some foreign policy he's gonna be more anything involving the Mideast or Asia. My assumption is they're just like the Obama administration, by the way, is not to put boots on the ground anywhere, because that's exactly what Obama surged in Afghanistan. Obama sent yes, right,
but
and in Iraq, I mean,
against that.
That's what's left, right? And that was also at an escalation phase in which he was, arguably, it was his defense at least, forced to do. But I think Biden is very sensitive to these things, as he argued in Iraq, notoriously so, and in North Africa during the Arab Spring, the same thing, and Syria. But I think, like, we can't think that that's Biden's foreign policy. That is Ben Rhodes's foreign policy, probably. But I don't know if that's Biden's foreign, and I don't think it's America's foreign policy. And I think we, as progressives, also like me to be very clear that, like, Biden's foreign policy is different than Hillary Clinton's foreign policy, and Hillary Clinton's foreign policy is different than Ronald Reagan's and George W. Bush's foreign policy. And they're not all the same. And yes, they are all based on preserving the empire, but they are all very different. So how do we? And so is, you know, Bernie Sanders' foreign policy, and so is AOC's foreign policy, and so is Elizabeth Warren's foreign policy. I mean, when you vote for the military budget, what does that mean? And on what under what conditions? I think we all have to be a little bit more nuanced in understanding, right? We are actually winning some of this debate now. Now what? Now where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, there is $1 million question there. I'm going to take this call because hold on one second. Hold on. Oh, calling from an 845 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Teacher Lauren. Hi, Emma.
Oh, hi, Teacher Lauren. How are you?
I'm just marvelous. I'm going to turn the conversation back to the classroom, if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, you're the perfect person to call in after our interview today.
Oh, thank you. Well, I had to, and I wanted to thank you for the interview, first off. So for people who don't know me, I've been working as a substitute teacher in public schools in New York for the past 6 years, and I did go into the classroom this past school year after I got my first shot. And the charter issue is something that has been just, I don't know, it's been a thorn for over 10 years for me. Back when I was a wee baby community college student, I had a teacher who just uncritically had us all sit through Waiting for Superman and presented it like, oh, look at charter schools, they're so great. And, you know, I'm like, well, why, if they're so great, why don't we scale up these practices into public schools? Why are they just limited to charters? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then, you know, when it was over, I was like, oh, this is just an anti-union hit piece. This sucks. And then when I was in grad school, actually a few professors brought their classes to a campus screening of backpack full of cash, which is like the anti Waiting for Superman, and I recommend everybody go watch it. It is,
Could you say it again? Backpack for cash? Backpack for cash?
Backpack full of cash.
Full of cash, yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
2018.
it's narrated by Matt Damon, of all people. He's very good on public schools. And I totally forgot where I was going with this.
Oh, sorry. No, you were talking about just kind of your like realization that this union, that this charter school push was an anti-union push.
Well, it's not only anti-union. You know, the more you learn about charter schools, the more you learn about how they really cherry pick their students, and they'll do this by offering applications that are only in English. So any students that come from non-English speaking homes are shut out. They charge fees, like exorbitant fees for uniforms. So, you know, kids living in poverty can't afford the uniform, can't go to school. They work their way around federal law regarding special education. I got my master's in special education, so this is really where I absolutely hate charters. But they'll skirt around, you know, special ed law by not accepting students with disabilities. They will try to goose their numbers by kicking kids out of the school if their grades are not where they want them to be, or if their quote unquote behaviors are a problem. So charters, like they have this way of siphoning up all these public resources and then cherry picking their own student body. So they'll turn these kids out in the middle of the school year, and now you have students who have to deal with the transition of changing schools in the middle of the year, which if anyone's ever done that, they know how hard it is. Teachers who have now new students in their classroom, in the middle of the year, that, you know, these kids have to adjust, the teachers have to adjust, the class sizes grow as the year goes on, and they're the kids that the charters don't want. So now the public schools have to do more with less because that money already went to the charters. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're really good. They put on this great shine, great publicity. I imagine that's where some of the money goes. But, you know, just, yeah, you know, fuck charters and fuck Bill Gates. That's all I got to say about that.
Appreciate it. Oh, go on, Nomi.
I was going to say, this is Nomi. A few years ago, I was reporting on charters, and I remember talking to a New York union, and I was shocked to hear that, and I'm sure I'm curious to hear if you've had this experience or seen this up close in any way, that when a charter abruptly shuts down, which happens a lot because the financial reward is not there anymore. It's based, you know, oftentimes the money is based on, you know, short-term, you know, profits and tied to hedge funds or real estate acquisitions as well. A lot of them are, you know, every state's different, but they're tied to real estate acquisitions. But what I found was sometimes the schools will shut down. And if, say, a student graduates and then takes a year off, which is not completely unusual, they'll go back. This happened many times where they went back to the school that had shut down and they weren't able to get their grades to go apply to a school because the school just disappeared. Or in some cases, and I know a lot of teachers talked about this, where they felt very frustrated and they were sort of working with the students, even though they were no longer employed at the charter schools. The schools would literally shut down, and like there would be like paperwork and private stuff, you know, like files all over the place. And you go to these buildings and they were just like abandoned overnight. And meanwhile, like people would find their transcripts literally just on the ground next to like old filing cabinets knocked over, and teachers were the ones that went back to go look for them because they at least had a sense of what was happening. And that's how some of the kids got their transcripts. Have you heard any of that?
In New York, I'm in the Hudson Valley. I haven't had to deal with any of that up here where, you know, in the districts where I sub and the districts where I'm looking for full-time work. So I don't personally know of any of that, but that, I mean, it doesn't surprise me to hear that, you know, charters are mismanaged and children's, you know, grades and records are mismanaged. You know, it's something that I wish the State Department of Ed would get a better handle on, but I don't have high expectations from them either. So it's something that I've had to deal with firsthand, but it doesn't, like, that tracks for charter schools.
Yeah. Appreciate the call, Lauren. Thank you so much for your input after today's interview. See you later.
Definitely. Thanks for doing the interview.
Yeah, sure. Bye.
All right, bye. Bye.
Okay. All right. Let's do some clips. We got a bunch of good ones today. Perhaps we can turn to J.D. Vance here. So Tucker Carlson had J.D. Vance on his show last night, and they are, of course, in the process of fear-mongering about Afghan refugees coming into this country, and Vance makes a dubious claim about the propensity for terrorism amongst these Afghans who would be seeking refuge in the United States due to the war that we started and occupied their nation for 20 years. So basically, there's a bunch of racist undertones here that are not that hard to figure out, but let's unpack a little bit about what Vance has to say here on Tucker Carlson's show.
Substance behind it.
Like, what are the promises that our government makes to the American public? So 70,000 people die of drug ODs. The FDA made that possible by approving all this poison into rural America. Was that a violation of a promise that our government made us? I mean, what are we guaranteed by the U.S. government? Any idea?
Yeah, exactly. The Constitution really is a compact between our government and our citizens about what the government owes us. And just think about these ridiculous politicians. Unfortunately, too many Republicans who say things like, well, we want all of these Afghan refugees in our neighborhood. I mean, who really believes that? You cited the Pew Research poll. Another finding from that poll suggests that 40% of Afghan refugees, 40% of Afghans believe that suicide bombing is a reasonable way to solve a problem. Who wants people like that in their community? Of course, 60% of Afghans don't believe that, but when you're not vetting people.
Let's just pause on the poll. I'm really curious where this poll came from, how accurate it is. At a time of so much dysfunction, did J.D. Vance's polling company just swoop in, get into that Kabul airport and make sure to get on the ground and accurately poll all Afghans to see who really believes in suicide bombs and not?
And how that's translated. Like, that's one thing we should do is let's flood a location on Earth with just guns and just empower warlords for 4 centuries and then poll them and see what their attitudes are like.
Yeah, right. And let's pull this up really quickly because J.D. Vance likes to say 40% of a specific population, where does he get this from? Who knows? 40% of a specific population believes in violence to achieve their political ends. Bradley, do you have this from earlier this year? In response to the insurrection, scary survey finding, 4 in 10 Republicans say political violence may be necessary. I think that's a bit more accurate in terms of the way that we can look at a specific population and their propensity for violence. Like, part of this too, and again, I hate regurgitating the GOP is the American Taliban thing because it's just so Bill Maher and like trite, but there's truth, and they project a lot of what they see from the Taliban. There's envy, as we covered on the show the other day, from these right-wing authoritarians, like, oh, the Taliban took back their country in 11 days. We could do that more quickly now.
Women are saying they want patriarchy over there.
Right, exactly. I mean, they treat their women correctly over there. Here, we just obviously they're under the thumb of gender studies or whatever the case may be. What did they say that we did? Like, we're creating trans bathrooms in Afghanistan, and that's why they're like, our project didn't work over there. That was another conservative argument that we heard. But let's just hear what J.D. Vance has to say, even though the polling, we should just put a massive asterisk next to it because we have no idea where he got it, and most likely Mr. Steele guy, the numbers guy, got it and pulled it out of his ass.
don't believe that, but when you're not vetting people properly, you're going to get a lot of bad people in your communities. So let's just be honest about the fact that if we want to have a real country, we need to make sure that good people are coming into this country. There are ways to help the Afghans who really did help our military without sending tens of thousands of unvetted people into our country. And the fact that our politicians aren't honest about that trade-off suggests they're either hiding something or they're just stupid. Either way, it's not very good.
Well, they don't care about the details because they don't care about the country. That's, I think, the answer.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so many different coded statements there, but, like, of course, they have to frame it like only the Afghans who helped our military are deserving of some sort of refuge in this country. How about the Afghans, the members of the family, the people who are members of families that we devastated with bombs, that we dropped bombs on their weddings, on their parties, on their homes, that we shot up, that we murdered? Perhaps they might have a case for refuge in the United States, and perhaps we should allow them just the smallest semblance of dignity and respect by giving them refuge in the United States. But, like, they have to frame it from just, oh, it's only if they help our military.
How about it's just international law? Simple as that, JD Vance.
Yeah.
You love America so much. You know what makes America so special? That we have that. That's kind of what makes us unique. That's kind of what probably, you know, maybe 40%, 60%. I'll go with 40 because we know that's a number you like, of the viewers of Fox News. It's probably why they're in the United States of America, is because we had these values. So let's just get back to our actual roots in loving America. I know, Tucker, this is not something you relate to because you came over on the Mayflower, but for the rest of us, it's something we relate to.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least we purport to do that. I think our record of colonialism and imperialism runs contrary to that. Unfortunately, the bulk of our history is different.
Two things at once.
I mean,
two things.
Yeah, because it is true, like, compared to other countries, like, we are more diverse. I mean, because of those colonial and like bonded labor reasons.
Yes.
But it's created a place where we are often more hospitable to refugees than, say, certain European countries are.
Well, right, exactly. We're seeing echoes of that in Scandinavian countries, of course, France, and what they're trying to put forward in terms of anti-Muslim laws. I mean, what I thought about in terms of Tucker's relationship with Orban was how he's basically taking cues from Orban about how to message fear-mongering about Muslims. Not that Tucker, who called people in Iraq monkeys, I believe, a few years ago, needs any lessons, but he's fine-tuning it a bit, and he's applying that very strategically to his messaging about Afghan refugees.
It's almost like they're both working with Steve Bannon.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tack on another people in that circle. It was only like 3 or 4 years ago that Jordan Peterson, before he had to go to like Russia because his all meat diet and apple cider screwed his immune system up, but he went over to Orban. And he visited Orban, who had just recently like taken over universities to stop gender studies from being taught. And the newspaper reporting was that they talked about how Islam is fundamentally incompatible with democracy. And Eric Weinstein gets on Twitter and says, I missed this meeting. Who said this was okay? And there's been absolutely zero follow-up on that story since then. It was just performative by Eric to sort of cover his ass as one of his, IDW mates consulted with a fascist.
Right.
It's just like when Joe Biden's favorite reporters question how the women are going to survive in Afghanistan now that he's pulled out. Same game.
And on that note, like, you can find reporting like from the start of the Afghanistan occupation of groups representing women saying, hey, you know what would really be good for women is if the Civil War stopped and we had some semblance of peace, and the people that weren't empowered were like these warlords with, teenage boys chained to their beds. That'd be nice.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the infrastructure fight. So, former Florida Congresswoman, and she was also a member of Clinton's cabinet, Donna Shalala. So she was on
Shalala. Donna Shalala.
Okay.
HHS secretary, former.
Oh, well, you're about to hear those lovely doldrums in her voice. She was on Bloomberg yesterday and talking about how the moderates, the centrists, the Gottheimer mod squad that are holding up the entire infrastructure process, that they're not actually true centrists. Here's a very interesting turn of events, a twist from Donna Shalala. I mispronounced her name because, you know, someone's got to do it when Sam isn't here. Let's take a listen.
All of this she wants to have done by October 1st. She has 9 members that disagree with that. They do not represent the centrist caucus. The new Dems, who are almost 100 members, and the progressives are another 100 members, 99% of them are with the speaker. So this is a tactical discussion. They want the vote on infrastructure first. They're holding out for that. She has consensus by, 95% of her caucus, except for these members. And it really is, it's not an ideological discussion because almost all of the centrists are with the speaker on the order in which she wants to have the votes. They understand that their progressive colleagues have to be brought together, that they have to really have a consensus on the order in which they take the votes.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting voice to be in support of Pelosi's position here, and goes to show that this posture by the mod squad, by these 9 right-wing Democrats who are basically doing this because they want to reimpose a tax break for wealthy blue staters, which we covered a little bit earlier with Josh Gottheimer, that they're actually out of step with how the party wants to proceed here. The DCCC is threatening their funding.
Good.
This exactly. I mean, for the first time, this is something I'm going to agree with the DCCC on. And the issue too is just this track was agreed upon for months. They are trying to blow it up with this posture at the 11th hour, hoping that Pelosi will cave and give their donors exactly what they want. And even if they're not successful, they can go back to their donors and say, okay, this is what we did. We tried our best to get this SALT deduction, etc. But like, what the issue is that this plays exactly into McConnell's hands. This is why McConnell voted yes on the bipartisan package, because he felt that if it passed, it has a better chance of derailing the bigger ticket agenda items from the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. And useful idiots and corporate tools like Josh Gottheimer are helping this process. And so you see that Shalala, she's on Pelosi's side. Pelosi, the White House, leadership, and progressives are on the same page about this, which is shocking. They want the massive the massive reconciliation package to pass, plus the bipartisan bill, and they need to be together. And the people that are really standing in the way of this are those 9 centrist, center-right Democrats. And so, like, even you have someone like Shalala calling them out. It's pretty interesting stuff there.
It reminds me a lot of the IDC in New York. Many of these people, not all of them, but many of them are from blue districts. And what that means is that they're actually incredibly vulnerable. But what happens is when you are like a tool of the establishment, in many cases, not all of them, and you like get into power and you actually don't have to hustle your way up into power and maybe don't like understand how power works on the ground and how votes work and what it's like to be challenged from the left or even the right or even the center, is that, and you get away with doing what you want because you're surrounded by money, like Carolyn Bordeaux in Georgia, who despite many great candidates running to the left of her, including Nabila Islam, she still won as a white woman in a majority minority immigrant district because she had the establishment supporting her. And so they don't know, they're conditioned to thinking they can get away with these things when she doesn't represent, Carolyn Bordeaux does not represent a district of wealth. Also, she might get redistricted. A lot of these people, like, some of this has to do with like it's a redistricting year and how are they going to hedge their bets. Some of it has to do with they're just so delusional about like how they might actually be reprimanded for something. And if not from the establishment, if not from the DCCC, if not from Nancy Pelosi, if not from the president, maybe the voters, because the infrastructure is so popular. I mean, that's why I look at someone like Donna Shalala. She's conditioned by the 90s. There was a time 15 years ago when the infrastructure bill was not something that was controversial on either side of the aisle. It was not something that you sat there and had debates about ad nauseum. It was a new Dems ticket item, as she said, because everybody wants to have a road and a bridge. And I mean, we all live in New York, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, if the subway's not working, you're gonna have to take a road. And if the bridges aren't working, and if the road's not working, what are you gonna take your helicopter? It's like 5 people and maybe more in New York. But like, seriously, I mean, you're just like climate change. At the end of the day, it's coming for you. And that's why people care about the infrastructure. They want their roads to work. They may not want to pay for it, but they want them to work.
Well, I mean, that's why you got, like, for the hard infrastructure, you really did get, like, you know, North Dakota Republican senator on board, a variety of people. I believe the vote was either 69 or 70 in the end. So this is, unfortunately, for the Republicans, a fairly broad, fairly popular, if not broad, topic and political point to take on. And so that's why they're floundering a bit. But to bring it back to the Mod Squad, Gottheimer, Suozzi, and co., they are playing into exactly what the Republicans want. They want dysfunction on this end. And, you know, in the Senate, we have Sinema saying $3.5 trillion, too much. I've decided to vote for the budget resolution to advance it. So in theory, I am completely in favor of that $3.5 trillion framework, at least in terms of my vote. But now that it's passed the budget process, I'm going to arbitrarily cut it down just because the number I've decided is too big. And I'm going to make it about, you know, me being the decider and cutting things down. But what's happening in the House is a bit more insidious. And also, in terms of playing into Republican hands, gifting this concept that Republicans are holding up Democrats are holding up their own agenda for a tax benefit for rich coastal elites. And you know what? It's true. And so that's not helpful in terms of making a clear distinction between the two parties. And the issue for Democrats is that, unfortunately, that distinction in terms of their donor base, it's not as much there as it was. The party isn't as funded by labor unions as it used to be, and they're relying more on suburbanite wealthy donors. We saw that in the Biden election in 2020. This is not going to be a long-term strategy that benefits them, and we're previewing that kind of politics and who that caters to with this Mod Squad Gang of Nine. And I worry about the long-term ramifications of having that emphasis.
You have the Gang of Nine in front of you, the names in front of you by any chance?
I do not.
Pull them up really quick just to remind everybody.
It's Ed Case from Hawaii, Vicente Gonzalez from Texas, Henry Cuellar from Texas, Gottheimer, Kurt Schrader from Oregon, Carolyn Bordeaux from Georgia, and then how many is that?
I don't know. I'm focusing a bit more on Suozzi and Gottheimer.
So it's 8.
Suozzi and Gottheimer.
Jersey and New York.
Yeah, they're pushing the SALT deduction as on principle, but like someone like Cuellar is just there to like be a dick and just be like a Republican in Democrats' clothing. They have different reasons for being obstructionists in this area. Yeah. Like this is just, you know, but the two moneyed interest reasons that are clearly identifiable and driven by the guy who's most at the forefront of this, who wants a clear concession on this, is Gottheimer, paired with Suozzi, who represents that part of Long Island. So the part of Long Island that both Gottheimer and Suozzi are in districts that are purple and wealthy suburbs of the city. And this is a clear attempt to gift the people that funded their election. And
frankly, Suozzi might be in trouble in terms of redistricting. I mean, we don't know what that district's going to look like.
Right.
So he's doing all he can. I mean, there were rumors 3 months ago that he was going to run for governor. And he still might, because he's insane. And he wants to be relevant. I don't think his district, he's going to lose his district. He can't actually. He's not the most recent elected, but it might be something that's not as suitable to him because he does overlap a little bit with Queens. Granted, it's more like suburban kind of Queens, but he has a challenger to the left who did very well last time, Melanie Dorigo, who, she ran a formidable campaign during COVID. And imagine what it's going to be like if now that people saw how well she did, how much money is coming in. She's raising a lot of money, and it's, you know, you can arguably run a more traditional campaign this time around.
Right.
I was a little scared.
Well, Virtual Sam, Emma mentioned labor unions with respect to Mod Squad. Note that OE Local 825 is putting out ads supporting Gottheimer and encouraging other Jersey politicians to go along with him. There are issues in labor as well, especially the building trades. That is very true. And we've been talking about this within the context of, well, one, what's happening with Medicare. I did an interview on this in New York State with city employees where, like, the unions basically did not... with the opinion of many members, advocate for healthcare in their best interests to the same degree, to the degree that they should. And part of the issue is that unions see the healthcare plans that they can provide for their prospective members as an ability to attract people to the union. And so that's very unfortunate that we have decimated unions in this country to the point that like, they're not, I think some unions are not advocating for single-payer healthcare in the way that they should because they want to maintain that. But that's more of a problem with the way that we have decimated labor law in this country than it is with, like, it's certainly not an issue with the concept of unions. It's about the way that we have gutted unions in this country.
And just how leadership has been put up in some of these unions, you know, whether they're actually from the membership or not, more professionalized, and have been there forever. And let's just be real, like, some of these labor unions are representing just actually more conservative interests. So if you're part of the building trades, you know, you probably are more concerned, at least from a leadership perspective, about development. Development isn't something that necessarily lines up with the left. So I'm just curious what's going to happen now that Cuomo's gone. Is Tom Suozzi going to feel protected anymor? Or some of these unions going to say, well, we got to do it because Cuomo's making us beholden with his budget negotiations, or you know?
Yeah. Sandy Martin, Emma, you are an amazing just pick this randomly. Emma, you are an amazing person who is intelligent and is a great reporter for progressive movement in America. I know my life as a soldier conflicts with this progressive ideology. I don't think that that's necessarily true, but I am a supporter of this movement. I am a fighter. I have fought my whole life. The progressive movement of a unified human race working together is what I want as well. Anyway, sorry for the long rant. Not long at all. I love you. And keep up the amazing work. Also ignore my first message, says Sandy Martin. I don't know what your first message was. Oh, Vance is an idiot. Something about that. Emma knows corn. I worked at an after-school program at a charter school in Chicago. It was one of the worst school conditions I've ever seen. They fired 1/3 of the teaching staff over spring break. When students came back from break, they had combined 3rd and 4th grade classes and 5th and 6th grade classes because of the staffing cut. They had no girls' bathrooms for most of the year due to plumbing problems. Even still, parents wanted to take a chance on this charter school versus the local public schools, which admittedly were poor. We have to support public schools instead of continuing to drain them and make people less skeptical of public services. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And like, it's just unconscionable what Rahm Emanuel has done in that city. His poll numbers reflect that too. Echo Park taxpayer. I went to a Melinda Gates pilot program school, a public school, with a $5 million private grant to reimagine education. It was the first time we had enough computers to have one for each student, and the graduation increased to near 100%. We had an hour a day devoted to college applications and career planning until the money ran out. Then the district couldn't afford to maintain all the expanded programs, and NCLB forced the curriculum back to standardized learning. All the initially passionate teachers who flocked to the district jumped to follow grant programs elsewhere. It was a beautiful idea to my young mind to boost publicly underfunded schools in 2002, but instead of solving structurally funded issues, it's been bastardized to rob the public coffers. What an important I am. I really appreciate your perspective, because like, you can see how that's like a sexy, tantalizing concept at first, right? We're going to have all this money, and then it's just going to get cut off without the public funding infrastructure. These like projects that, you know, are about rich people wanting to feel like they are contributing to society. They don't have the infrastructure. The tap needs to keep going, or else it's going to be a disaster.
And it's private-public partnerships. They're actually pulling not only from the funds of public schools, but also getting rewarded. I mean, public schools don't get rewarded the way that these foundations do. And just very important, that 100%, and you probably covered this already, that 100% graduation rate, I'm going to guess, it was a self-selected 100%. So yes, wonderful. But, these lotteries have proven, if there's a lottery, by the way, have proven to be self-selected lotteries and very inaccurate. And even with all the self-selection, cumulatively, charter schools underperform related to public schools.
Right.
So it's
we
like
talked
they're
about that.
fixing
Yeah. We had an author on who was very had a bunch of the stats ready to go. But this was in 2002, so this might have been a really, fresh iteration of it, but generally now, given how charter schools have evolved, you're 100% right. It's always snowy in Ottawa. I wasn't able to watch Bachelor in Paradise last night, so unfortunately I don't have a fun BIP-related comment today. Well, luckily, it's now a 2-episode-a-week phenomenon for the next few weeks, so you'll get to tune in tonight. In lieu of that, I have a question for the whole crew. If you could make one pop culture prop/item real or commonplace, what would it be? Lightsaber, flight packs, or universal translators are examples of my top tier lists. I feel like Matt probably has some sort of
I don't know what practical use this would be, but when I was a kid, I really was fascinated with the green ooze in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And I wanted that, like a canister of that.
Did you love to go to stores and get like goo from the counter? They would always have it like arts and crafts stores for kids, just some sort of clay or goo that you could play with. It reminded me of, they had like one of the monsters in the Goosebumps books, like a green goo.
Remember that show on the Nickelodeon show or the slime? It was the remember that where they dumped slime?
No. They still do that.
Is Nickelodeon still around?
I think I would like a Harry Potter wand. I know that's not the coolest answer.
I mean, I'd rather have the broom than the wand.
The wand can do a lot more things than the broom.
The broom's transportation.
Well, you're really into anti-car transportation.
Can you imagine how much cooler New York would be if you had a broom and you could just like whisk over to Manhattan?
Yeah, but without your wand, you wouldn't be able to protect yourself from the rain in snowy conditions. So.
I got these fists.
No infrastructure bill with that.
punching the snow.
Yeah, I just ride on my broom just with my fist outstretched.
Oh yeah. Charge.
Do you think the Force counts for these purposes, or is that too broad from Star Wars?
The Force is not a physical object, so yeah. I don't know. But the lightsaber was brought up as an option.
Or Spider-Man's like webs.
Oh
yeah.
Spider-Man's. Yeah.
This is so hard.
The Batmobile. All right, I'm a dork.
Is there like a mind reading one? I don't remember any of this stuff.
But the wand is just so multi-purpose. Like, I understand Harry Potter's not cool anymore, but
no, she's not cool anymore.
Gandalf's staff. Sorry,
she's not cool anymore.
She's not cool anymore, but like there are weird stuff in Harry Potter, like some anti-Semitic stuff and
some weird bloodline stuff,
some weird anti-Asian stuff, some weird Jesus Christ imagery. Not great. But I'll like read that to my kids and explain it. Dave 4133, the Eagles will absolutely pound the Giants into the bottom of the division. They're going to be one of the worst 5 teams in the league, dude. Enjoy another long offseason. Go Birds. I love all the IMers, but Eagles fans not as much. Prairie Fire. Something I noticed yesterday in the comments after my call I'd like to explain. You can't eliminate meat without large greenhouses in the Midwest for the USA. We grow cereal grains to maintain livestock through the late fall, winter, and early spring. Unless a national program to transition to a local production of foods in greenhouses, a vegan diet, to a lesser extent vegetarian diet, will overstretch the Southeast water resources. Not to mention it is predicated on largely exploiting migrant labor, while meatpacking workers are permanent residents and are a part of our communities now with massive cultural and familial ties. Greenhouses are more in that vein and require similar labor. On the whole, veggie diets are better for many reasons, but unless you spread the input resource load out, like we have with livestock, it will not be sustainable. We are not India with a subtropical savanna climate capable of growing plant proteins year-round. The systems we are talking about are very complex. As much as I would want and understand we need radical change to improve our food production. Just remember, failure is famine.
Was that Kowalski again?
Yes.
Man, should get a little Kowalski farm report minute.
I know. Is he? Oh, he's speak of the devil. Kowalski, we just, I believe this is you, 308?
Wow, this is embarrassing. So I didn't have any data service, so this is just my way of listening to the program, as my radio is also out in my tractor.
All right,
So-
well, we'll hang up, but appreciate the call and the input.
Oh, wait, if I got you still, though, no, Miki, message me on Patreon and I can get you Kowalski's shirt.
Ooh, okay, I'm down.
Giving to all of the nice people on the internet.
I see it every day in my drawer, and Matt's been wearing it to the office.
I've been wearing them.
Maybe
Very
I should
comfortable.
wear it.
Thank you, Kowalski.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank
Kowalski.
you.
Oh,
We'll message you. Thank
all
you.
right, I'm going to get back to shredding.
Sure,
Bye.
but last thing we'll leave you, it's very, very Midwest of you to have the logo on the front of whatever that is, and then the Kowalski logo on the back. Oh, he's gone. Okay.
He'll do that.
Wait, how is that Midwest? I'm curious. Is that like a...
Well, it's just like it looks like maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's like I've seen that more when I've been in the Midwest, like the logo of the, what is that on the
Well, that's
front?
a Kowalski Family Farms Incorporated, I believe. Which I didn't know. I thought it's just KFFI, and then there's a sort of more elaborate logo on the back.
Yeah.
Which I recognize that to be right up front to be the Kowalski logo, but KFFI is also Kowalski Family Farms, and that one's up front.
Okay, maybe that was probably just
Because I also thought it was like, oh, this is an interesting way to do this shirt, because it is like the cool logo is on the back. So, for instance, if I was wearing it on air, I would turn around to show off that logo.
Yeah. Nomi Key writes in, can you please shout out hashtag Halftown Must Go? There's an indigenous struggle in upstate New York. Clint Halftown has been terrorizing the Cayuga Nation, and we're calling on the Bureau of Indian Affairs to revoke his leader status. Please Google Halftown Must Go or check out Facebook/Instagram for action items.
Clint Halftown?
Yes.
Yeah, up in Seneca County Supervisors. We'll have to look into that.
We'll look into that, but there's your shout out. All right. Calling from an 825 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
825, this to you?
Yep, hi. This is Pradeep calling from Canada.
Pradeep calling from Canada.
So yes, yep.
Great.
So we have an election coming up. So I just thought I would tell everyone in Canada to register as soon as possible. It barely takes 5 minutes. So, and then everyone can vote by mail. All you have to do is do it from your phone. You can go onto their website. You can do it really quickly. Also, real quick, I think, Nomi, you're absolutely correct about the redistricting stuff and how, Gottheimer and all these guys, I think they're really looking for those Chamber of Commerce ads, thanking them for kind of, according to them, fighting for infrastructure so that, when they're out of office or whatever, they get nice, cushy jobs. So I think that's a major aspect. And for all you guys, Matt, Emma, thanks a lot for pushing back on that caller, who's talking about Islam being a major threat to him in America and stuff.
In Arizona,
especially
right?
Now, that's yes, exactly, and especially now, I feel like that's so dangerous for people on the left to engage in that kind of bullshit because now we're going to be having that push for more immigration and more refugees coming in. And it just creates more hostility towards them and makes lives so much more miserable. And so, the pushback you guys gave was, I think, absolutely accurate and correct and very important. So thanks for that.
I appreciate it, Pradeep. Thank you for the call.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think I was beginning to grow out of my kind of resentment towards religion in general, as I got into this industry, but Michael was super instrumental in just maybe seeing how counterproductive and just
Well, you have to historicize it.
Right.
If you're going to talk about religion, it can't be about the fundamental ideas, making people, whoever subscribes to it, have such and such propensity of violence. Like, that's just not a smart and frankly anti-reactionary way to think about religion. But if you historicize the way it interacts with politics and institutes policy, or functions as sort of like a parallel psychological operations for like a state government or something like that, then I think that's interesting. But again, when you focus it on the believers themselves, it's just reactionary.
It's a vehicle for empowerment for some people, which that's what breeds extremism in areas that have been, like, for example, decimated by American imperialism and war. Like, the propensity for using religious fundamentalism in ways that empower people is like because of those conditions.
Yeah, and of course it empowers even people who aren't, from a marginalized background, right? Like, if you want to have a be like in America, right? If you were an atheist, you were going to have a lot of political power going forward that was going to be used against you. But
Bin Laden was from a very wealthy family.
Right.
He utilized it in a way to create his own like political power, but anyway.
Yeah, it's just not when Sam Harris is reading the Quran looking for like the secret ways Muslims are going to attack you. It's just silliness and fear-mongering.
It's cosplay. It's basically like, being a Nick Cage movie about the fucking like secret behind the Declaration of Independence, dude.
It's the worst kind of fear-mongering that serves sort of like imperial interests in all sorts of different places. America, India, Israel, like, right? Like, and to be taking part in these conversations in ignorance of the way that they're being weaponized for those purposes is just irresponsible.
Yep.
Or strategic. I don't know. Maybe
Right.
You and I
But
can
for
just
our caller-
messages from the Bible about women and
yeah,
do the same exact thing.
And then you're in this like myopic, stupid conversation, making value judgments about. But the Bible's was worse than what the Quran. Who cares? Like,
all
again,
the texts.
Again, it really does not matter about the substance of what these things say. You bring up India. Islamophobia is being used currently to subjugate Muslims in the country by a Hindu nationalist regime. It's very much contextual and about power. It's not about like the magic spell that text and religion creates.
It's the opium.
Right. Opium and oil. Wyoming Ryan, sorry, I'm a Washington taking the division again this year with Dak being hurt, Saquon being iffy with his injury, and
Look, I like sports tweets, but man, it's so focused on the NFC East, and that is tough.
Well, they're trying to get me to read them. Yeah, I think Washington. It goes Washington, Giants, Dallas, Eagles. That's it.
Go Jets.
Go. Sure. Chardonnay socialist. This just in. Harry Potter was never cool. 50 million Elvis fans are wrong all the time. I don't know what that means. I know Harry Potter was never cool. Like, I went to the fucking midnight premiere with a wand.
Oh yeah, I didn't tell any of my friends that I was reading that shit. At no point.
I'm too old for this. I was in college, I think, when it came out. I have no idea what like.
Yeah,
I thought all the kids were reading it.
I was Harry Potter's age when I read the first Harry Potter book. Like, so I got right in the groove there. And
what year was it?
Oh gosh,
2003 maybe.
Yeah, I was in college. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and rest assured, I did not tell anybody on the basketball team that I was reading Harry Potter.
Yeah, I think I went dressed up at like age 15, 16. So it's not.
I mean, clearly it was popular enough. So
I did it in secret with another friend of mine, but yeah, not good. I was a late bloomer. And Buenora, please let us not allow this ridiculous nonsense of pretending that if one single war ends, the U.S. is flirting with isolationism. Did someone say that?
Well, I mean,
don't know.
there might be a bit of sensitivity that, Biden's all of a sudden, withdrawing America from the world, which is an impression being made by, dishonest people and national security.
Yeah,
reporting.
maybe that was just like a reference to the reporters we were talking about, right?
Well, it's also, I think, like sort of a on the reactionary, like who knows what real left or propped up left online is like very much kind of trying to create that narrative, and it's not real. That's not the world that we live in.
All right, maybe let's actually just do this in this Alex Jones thing, because this is interesting. So,
oh my God, yes.
Yeah, Alex Jones has turned on Trump. Now, we also should note that his InfoWars co-host had to surrender to the government after being investigated for his involvement in January 6th. His name is Owen Schroyer. Now, Alex Jones might be a little tense. Maybe he's just having difficulty grappling with his good buddy, probably going to jail.
I should say, like, Owen Schroyer was caught at rallies saying, hey, we need to stop the electoral validation process with force. So
right.
I'm kind of just explicitly stating the plan there.
Yeah, just on camera saying, I love terrorism, and then, of course, he gets arrested. So, like, yeah.
One question. Isn't this the same rally that Alex Jones was at? Let's just make this, like, wasn't Alex Jones outside at that same rally?
For January 6th? I don't recall if he was there. I would guess
he was outside.
There. But, you know, like, Charlie Kirk was bussing in people. Roger Stone was there. Alex Jones is very Roger Stone adjacent.
He's the fall guy.
Yeah.
And Owen Schroyer was, like, in the crowd, too. I don't think, at least Jones, if he was in D.C., he wasn't, like, in amongst the, like, behind the barriers and stuff like that. He's probably a little bit too smart for that.
So Alex Jones' buddy Donald Trump told people to get the vaccine, said he's been vaccinated at a rally in Alabama, immediately walked it back because there was a boo, and all Trump knows is how to respond to the way a crowd responds. And, you know, this is a really interesting friction between them, because even before Trump came on the political scene in the way that he has and became president, like, Jones was promoting anti-vax stuff from the beginning. This is his beat. This is where he's got his, like, bona fides. Damn it, Sam. This is his bread and butter. This is what gets him going in the morning. And so to see his BFF, king of the deep state, anti-deep state warriors, saying he got vaccinated and saying people should, that must hurt him deeply. Poor Alex. Let's watch what he had to say.
Got a bunch of medical doctors I want to play for you on this when we come back. But first, let's take President Trump, who I believe is a good person.
Why?
And who I really care about, and who I want to see get a lot of good Republicans elected in the midterms, and who I would love to see run again. We got to take him to the woodshed, though, because he came out last week on Fox and Friends and said, I really am suspicious of this booster shot. If this supposedly works so well, why do I need a booster shot? Because you got lied to, Trump. It didn't have 98% efficacy. We knew day one it wouldn't work, period. It's a fraud. It'll create mutants. You got chumped. You got signed on to a fraud to restart the economy. I understand why you did it. You believe in science. Except these are bad actors, sir. You believed America could produce a good vaccine. Of course they could have. They didn't want to. They didn't create a vaccine. They created a Frankenshot.
What?
And now they've got you signed up to it.
Frankenshot's
coming. Now the left's saying you better get out there and push it, and you are. CNN comes out and says, we need to see Trump come out and tell people to take the shots. And within weeks of them saying it over and over again, CNN snaps their fingers. Jeff Zucker snaps his fingers, and Trump clicks his heels and hops up there at attention and says, how high do you want me to jump, boss?
Pause it.
There's Trump in Alabama yesterday.
All right, so I think we got the gist there. Like, by the way, just the casual anti-Semitism with Jeff Zucker there. Jeff Zucker, Jewish, pulling Trump behind the scenes now when, like, Trump was supposed to be fighting all of those globalists, aka Jews, from the beginning. What's happened?
I'll just say you mentioned, or that news article mentioned, a rise in cases in Iceland. I'll just say, as far as deaths, there's one death, it looks like, since maybe December 27th. I don't know if that's
probably
accurate.
From the Frankenshot
in Iceland, and that's a coronavirus death. And the cases, there was a spike that got up to 100 people, 150 people a day, and it's going down. So it looks like that vaccination is actually serving Iceland rather well and protecting people from dying. And they've only had 30 deaths total anyway.
I love that he, like, infused nationalism in that. Like, there was this whole, like, if America wanted to produce a shot, first of all, didn't we produce a shot? And, like, also, if we wanted to beat the pack, we would have had to produce it faster. So, like, wouldn't that have been more of an untested Frankenshot? I I don't understand why he had infused the nationalism in there. Like,
well, he's gotta.
I mean, that's the thing is, like, how does he distinguish himself from Brett Weinstein at the Dark Horse podcast, right? Like, he's got to throw in the extra stuff because functionally, there's not a whole lot of. I mean, Weinstein isn't saying like it's creating mutants.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to turn you into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But I mean, he's stopping just short of that. It might be more dangerous. Like,
it might kill you, and I'm saying it in a very calm tone, as opposed to, well, let's go, right? Like mutants.
Frankenshot.
Yeah, the Frankenshot, which again, like, sorry, the good branding for his purposes, but like, has Jones considered that the 5G that was injected into Donald Trump is making his brain go crazy, and Jeff Zucker is actually, via the 5G signal that is now in Donald Trump's orange and like grainy arm, heavy-set arm, like in terms of the skin, it's a little grainy because, you know, he tans all the time. He is getting a signal from the deep state saying what they want to say unknowingly in some sort of hypnosis and encouraging people to get the shot that's going to make them mutants.
I mean, isn't that why we all agree with Trump all the time? Because we're all on the same page. The 5G, Jeff Zucker writes the talking points and then just infuses all of us to agree on everything so that, you know, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump and Key Const and Emma Vigeland and Sam Seder and Matt, we're all on the same page because that's how the 5G works. We're just all lemmings, guys.
This isn't true Trump. This is the 5G.
Just a note, you can look at Florida it's on its third wave now. This current wave is reached a higher deaths per day peak than either of the previous two. And you can compare that to like a more vaccinated state like New York, who is yet to, despite rising cases, is yet to see a rise in deaths at all. So there's your vaccine.
And it's not, I mean, what's so interesting too is like, keep in mind, the first wave of Florida was a lot of nursing home facilities, and many elderly have been vaccinated now. So I'm really curious to see like, what are the demographics of the folks who are dying now? Are they younger? Are they, you know, less healthy and younger? I mean, are they, it's just, it seems like we start off our vaccine process, especially if you're in a nursing home. I think as of now, you have to take a vaccine. And if you're a nurse, at least, you know, as Biden has put out, like you have to have a vaccine in public hospitals and facilities. So I'm just like, who are these people? If it's a higher rate, like they really got to do their work to just like stay in their own little filter bubbles.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to become increasingly more difficult. And that's why these compulsory measures work. And we have to make it as uncomfortable for people to not be vaccinated as possible. And then, you know, there's no other option, because obviously the intellectual and moral case is not enough. Needs to be something that affects people materially in a way, not in terms of like their income. We have people writing in saying they should be denied care at hospitals, or like that's not what I believe whatsoever. But in terms of like doing things they want to do, go to the movies, go to a restaurant, that's what you have to do.
Listen, they're not going to taste their Applebee's chicken wings, as those memes are saying. Sex life's going to kind of suck, probably more than it already does. And that's what we should be talking about. Very simple.
Those Applebee's were a godsend for me when I was on the road. You can get a full course meal, and it doesn't matter where you're at; it'll still be sort of standardized.
Oh yeah, I'm Applebee's guy. I didn't even want to get into it actually.
Oh my god, I don't.
The boneless wings are primo.
I'm a big fan of the Long Island iced tea deal night.
Oh, great! So when you want to just fucking die.
LITs.
God, Long Island iced tea, like that was me in college saying, "Get me as drunk as possible."
Yes.
I don't know if I have that stamina anymore. Right?
No, exactly.
As soon as possible.
Yes.
Now it's just a good dirty martini, guys. This is how the adults do it. Don't give me any of your juice from the Long Island iced tea.
That really is like, I don't drink martinis, but my friends do. My friends love to drink, and like that is just like the new thing. I was like, okay, we would do shots in college, and now you guys just want to just do the same thing, except it's more respectable when we're eating. To do a martini.
Mama and Daddy's way of getting blasted.
Exactly.
Classily.
Right. It looks classy. All right, we're gonna take one more call, read some IMs, and then we're gonna get out of here. calling from a 409 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 409.
Yes, hello. This is Justin from Houston.
Justin from Houston. How are you?
Good, thank you. Okay, since November 1st of last year, Japan has had, according to University of Maryland mask surveys, had a 96% mask compliance. And Japan they have a culture of wearing masks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since then, they've had 3 spikes of COVID cases. So is the claim still being made that masks prevent or slow down COVID cases?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if I just stated to you that there have been 2 spikes and there's a 96% level of mask compliance, how does that claim still hold?
Do people wear masks in their homes?
Well, I mean, they go commuting. People walk a lot in Japan. They go in public transportation a lot in Japan. Like, it seems like, you know...
I mean, it's hard to control these variables. It's not just mask versus no mask, like Japan versus America. They have a whole different, like, relationship, particularly with these sorts of respiratory illnesses. So I don't...
Okay, let me...
No. Hold on one second, though.
There's more.
Is your claim that... We are claiming that masks do reduce the spread of COVID because you can sit in a room for longer with a mask and not get infected at the same rate. That is
bearing
true.
in mind that it matters, like the type of mask does matter, but and it's hard to quantify the degree to protection you get from a cloth mask versus N95.
Right, and the length with which you are staying in a room does matter. So, like, these are all variables.
But also, like, one other variable here, which goes back to the Florida point, which is how can you have a spike when more people are vaccinated from the more at-risk populations, is who are the people that are not wearing masks and are not vaccinated, and are they all interacting with each other with absolutely no protection? Because if, you know, we're all in an office together vaccinated and with masks on, the chances of us spreading any whatever version of COVID, maybe one of us is picked up from an unmasked, unvaccinated person, is much, much less than if one of us picked it up from an unvaccinated person and got into a room with a bunch of unmasked, unvaccinated people. And then you'd see a spike in spreading in that community. It's why it spread in the beginning. When you saw Orthodox communities who were refusing certain precautions, you saw a rapid increase.
You're saying that there's a 96% mask compliance. So I just want to unpack a little, like, what you're trying to say, though. Are you saying that this is the worst it could possibly be? Because there's probably good indications that because less than 50% of Japan's population is vaccinated, that the spikes are smaller because of masks.
Well, I don't know enough about their vaccination rates, but I'm just trying to isolate the truth claim about mask wearing. And
you can't
isolate. You can't do it, bro. You can't control these variables. It's too complex of a problem. It's just.
Well, but okay, fine, but then I think the burden is on people who claim that mask wearing reduces cases. They're the ones who aren't making that case sufficiently. Because again, in Bavaria versus the rest
by
of the
your own
Bavaria,
standard, man, it's sufficient for everybody else, but your own standard is claiming that it doesn't. It's insufficient. So, like,
but the cases are spiking despite mask mandates in Bavaria.
But they also have the Olympics, bro.
It would be worse without mask mandates, and they just had an influx of a bunch of people into the city, as you say, into Tokyo.
Look, the truth is, masks, if as a single policy thing, in the absence of like forcing distancing and vaccination and shutting down certain sections of the economy, it's just not going to do everything. And so you're right that it's not going to stop COVID. But the fact, here's what Michael Osterholm says. I support the wearing of cloth coverings by the general public. Stop citing SIDRAP and me, because people like, frankly, I'm not saying you're doing this, but this argument is a common one. This isn't the first time people have heard it. Stop citing Sidrap and me as grounds not to wear masks, whether mandated or not. Don't, however, use the wearing of cloth mask face covering as an excuse to decrease other crucial, likely more effective protective steps like physical distancing. And then he goes into talking about how the difficulty it is to study this stuff. So no, like we can't in the middle of a pandemic with a novel virus make sure that we have like studies that are going to perfectly prove this very difficult thing it is to basically like exclude different variables for. It's just not, you're not going to be satisfied.
Well, then how do people so strongly make the assertion that it stops the spread of cases?
Because we do have evidence for that.
But there's another set of evidence that goes against that assertion, though.
Well, I mean, there's difficulty with, like, frankly, the best thing people should do is, also the Delta variant makes this a bit difficult, but, like, the thing masks do is cut down on your ability to transmit it. Now, you can still catch it when you still have masks, but, like, again, it's impossible to study this stuff because it's a moving target. We literally have a different disease we're fighting than the one we had last year. And so like it's a precautionary measure, and it should be stressed that it is not one that should be done in absence of other stuff, and it's not one that's going to fully take down cases. But like, I don't know. I think like this idea that you need to completely prove that a disease that is aerosolized, that goes out through the respiratory system, that we should be against wearing masks, I think is just silly.
And why do doctors wear it if it has no efficacy?
Well, and regardless, he said that there's other evidence that says it does not prove it. Actually, there isn't. There's actually zero evidence. If you're going to use evidence as your ammunition, there is zero evidence that proves otherwise. You know what there is a lot of? There's a lot of evidence that proves it does actually reduce the transmission. There's a ton of evidence that says it reduces the transmission. There's literally zero evidence that says that it might not.
Is evidence against
no, it's not.
No, that's not evidence. That's not evidence.
Hold on.
That's not evidence.
You are making a causal relationship when there's a correlation between cases spiking and people wearing masks. That relationship is making that a causal relationship is anti-science, and it flies in the face of exactly what Nomi is saying, the preponderance of the evidence in this instance. So like you are making that conclusion and pretending like that is a scientific one when it's just not the case.
Sweden has 2% mask compliance according to the same survey that Japan had, and their spike is much lower than that of.
Dude, Japan just had the Olympics. Hang up.
All right.
Japan just had the.
I hung up.
I'd love to see the scientists' research on that one. Like when they write up, come on, this is.
Also, Sweden's a bad example. They literally are the worst COVID handling Nordic country. Like.
Yeah,
well, I mean, that's only if you look at how many people died and not how many like school days were missed.
Well, yeah.
How many people are wearing masks?
Apples and apples, yeah. Anyway, so you are handling this well, says Nerd Cheetah. Maybe until the end. Artax, the anti-mask dude, is not taking into account that people don't wear masks, went out to restaurants and mingling with different friend groups without masks. I tried to say that. Also, the current giant spike is obviously from the Olympics. Sam Cedar Simp, university classes start for me tomorrow, and the administration announced a policy that professors are not allowed to even make a request for students to wear masks. What school are you at, man? I'm so sorry. That's awful. Fierce Deity, 73. Pretty sure Nomiki is right. I don't think he was charging the doors, but I remember seeing a clip of Alex Jones speaking to a crowd on January 6th. I think so too. John, how come even though there are seatbelts, there are still car accidents? Yeah. Just a few more. Ryan Cole, as the certified coastal elite, I have never eaten at an Applebee's. Well, have you eaten at the TGI Fridays? Also,
oh my God.
Be on the road.
Just really quick side note. I have to share this. The chicken fingers from, I don't eat meat. I haven't in 15 years. Chicken fingers from TGI Fridays dipped in their strawberry applesauce. That's the jam. Little trick.
So you have that, you carried that for 15 years, just in terms of just like thinking about
it's
good old days.
If I decide to splurge, that's where I'm going.
I got you.
All in ambulance.
Have you read my email? Late bloomer, no Emma, embrace your nerdiness. Being a nerd is new cool. I tell myself that every day. No, I just mean like I was like not interested in like drinking or smoking pot until later in high school and stuff, or even things that were not, you know, related to things like Harry Potter or Gilmore Girls. But like then when it hit, I was smoking all the pot and drinking all the beer. It's just like an overshare. Champion communist. Friendly remember that Tom Brady is the best quarterback to ever do it. Okay, this one says don't read this part on air, so I won't. Echo Park taxpayer, masks equals physics equals truth. Cucker Tarlson, plus Japan is still having the Paralympics, influx is still present. And the final IM of the day, Travis from Pittsburgh, the spike is not a real thing, it's the difference between two time periods. It doesn't even show how bad it was before and after a spike. I'm not sure what that means, but I am pretty sure I agree. Don't clip that.
That is so not science-based. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily like, I don't know. This is when you know that I need to eat something. All right, guys, heading out. I'm oversharing. I'm not completing my sentences. This is how it goes. Nomiki, thank you so much for your time.
Everyone.
Appreciate it. Matt,
bye, y'all.
Appreciate it. And also check out the Nomiki Show. Check out Left Reckoning, Doomed, of course, and everywhere else in our little network we've got going on here. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching.
Bye, y'all.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made.